final day, we're leaving town. Like everyone's leaving, and it's kind of like, okay, so we're gonna get the money back for the thing. Well, we never told you to do any of that. He like he stopped his van in the middle of the fucking highway, literally in the middle of the highway, like middle of a row of like middle lane.
Right.
Stopped and said, "You're gonna pull that money out of your pocket, or I'm not moving." And cars are going like around him like 100 miles an hour, and he's sitting in the middle lane. And they're like, "You're crazy, man! You're crazy."
Hey, we are back in the Jug Den for part 2 of our interview with Adam Dunn. Here today with my good friends, Jayhawk and Adam. Let's get
Part 2, get ready, buckle up. We're all excited. Had a great first part. Part 2 coming at you.
So I arrived there, and I'm in Port Antonio, which is like the east side. It's like the wrong side of the island. It's where you don't want to be there. Like that's where they have lots of weed, but it doesn't dry because it's so wet.
Right.
So like I didn't really get I didn't get a great experience cannabis wise on this trip because I was like, we were in a really dope place. It was tropical and beautiful. The nicest part of the island.
Bunch of wet weed.
But the weed was really wet. Yeah. So I kind of like didn't get the full experience on that trip, but was there for a little while. Then we took the boat back from there to Florida. So we did like this whole trip through, and it was awesome. It was like snorkeling and fucking Cayman Island, like all these killer spots, and like just like the whole vibe. Get up to Florida, and funny enough is like, as we pull in, like we just go straight past the fucking dude and don't even check in and just unload, and it all dawns on me at that point. I'm like, oh, are you fucking kidding me? I didn't realize we had a whole load the whole time. I was like, oh, I get, and we got boarded on the way up. Like we got boarded by fucking customs and by Coast Guard. Like they
and
came
you're just like,
and I was just like, didn't know. So that was the best part, is not knowing was the best part, because if I knew, I would have been fucking like, oh, they're on the boat now, and it was like,
that's a good story right there, bro.
It just keeps getting better.
Yeah. So that was coming back with that. And then I moved to Florida, and I was in Florida in Fort Lauderdale. And cause my mom had she had a little house there. I was like, it's like an area that if you go now, it's like nothing that was there when we were there is there. It's all gone. It's all gone. Like we had this really cool little bungalow that was like handed down from friend to friend to friend, and it was like $400 a month or something stupid.
Right.
Like, so it was like
stayed the same price for 30 years.
And it was right off of Las Olas, which is now like the most fucking expensive spot in all of the area, And so we had this like cool little house right near the beach. And it was in 88, 89, right before I left. And so it was kind of like the perfect time period in a weird way too, because, it was not the perfect time period because it was like definitely like Fort Lauderdale was a bunch of old people and Miami was just a bunch of cokeheads. You know what I mean?
Right.
And the weed was kind of like public enemy number one. And I remember getting like, some crypto or some other kind of like, there was some good weed down there, but it was really hard to find.
Sure.
And like, I ended up, because all my English friends that were there working on the boats, because we all worked on boats together. And it was funny too, because all the English guys most of them were illegal because they'd overstayed their visas.
Sure. They just hung out for longer.
And so they were all working on boats. So eventually they'd just get on a boat and sail to wherever, and then they'd be good. Right. And so yeah, it was funny. It was also the same time as Cops came out, the show, right? Oh. And it was in Broward County, right? So it was right there. Yeah. So I'm like living in the spot where Cops comes out, right? We're sitting there. I remember one time we're sitting at the house, we're smoking a joint, and Jamaican weed was like kind of what we always had, right? Because that was like the normal. That was like the normal thing. So we had some, and we never shut our doors, right? We always just left the door open. And I'm sitting there smoking a joint with my friends. I have my 3 English friends. We're watching Cops. Right? And it's like, and we're all pumped.
Okay, I know where this is going.
We're like, oh, this guy's fucking idiot here, right?
You hear the sirens on the show, and then you realize they're outside.
pretty much, yeah,
more or less.
Yeah, pretty much happened. So basically, at one point, all of a sudden, this fucking cop literally opens up my door and goes, did a black guy just run in here? And we go like, and we're all standing there.
Does he have to be black?
And I remember I dropped the joint, I put my foot on it, and I go, no. I go, you can go and look, because there's only one bedroom in our place. And he goes and looks in our bedroom. And then as he's leaving the door, he goes, don't do anything illegal while I'm gone, or something like that. And I was just like, that is the weirdest shit that ever happened. Right. And then the two English kids that were with me were like
we're out of here.
Trembling. Right. They were, they were so scared. They were
getting iced.
They were like, we're going down. This is it. Like, they were like, dude, I'm so illegal right now. Like, it was like one of those moments.
Mate, I'm so illegal right now.
Not only am I not supposed to be here, but I'm in a house with weed.
But exactly. Yeah. But then, I was down there for a little while, and pretty much opportunity came up where there was a boat that my friends were working on that was doing a transatlantic, and they were like, hey, we're looking for another crew member. Do you want to come? And I was like, fuck, that sounds interesting.
Why not?
So I was like, I didn't have anything going on, and I was like, well,
wow, that's awesome.
Let's do that, So then got on the boat.
Super cool.
And it was in Fort Lauderdale.
Who knew?
We took the boat from Fort Lauderdale to Bermuda, then the Bermuda to the Azores, and then the Azores to Gibraltar, and then Gibraltar to Athens. And then I got off the boat in Athens.
Oh, wow.
And then
that's super cool, bro.
And then I had
how big a sailboat?
It's like 100-footer.
Oh, that's a big boat.
Yeah,
that's a big boat.
Yeah, 100 foot. It was a nice.
Real big.
It's called Mysteer of England was the name of the boat. It was a really nice. It was a really, really nice boat too. It was like
100 feet. I bet.
This one was the opposite of the other boat that I was on. The other boat that I was on, everything was automatic, or everything was manual. This one, everything was automatic. You could like just put your foot on.
Well, in the other boat, you were moving weed. This trying
to save the weight. You know what I mean?
And so the guy who
so that's how you made it over to Europe.
Yeah. So the guy who owned
that's pretty cool. Yeah. I wasn't expecting that part of the story.
I was not either.
Yeah, it was the best way to go, because it was like I was getting paid $100 a day. I couldn't spend it because I'm on the boat. Right.
Yeah.
So you get
I've had friends who were in merchant marine, and same thing. Like they're like, you're out on the water for 3 months and you just stack cash. You come back and you got all this money.
Exactly. So basically we would it took us like 21 days total to do the full crossing. I think 17 days at sea total, and the rest were all inside, or something like that. It was like, and basically each time we'd stop, we'd have a fucking storm coming in, storm going out. It was always like, it was definitely a pretty heavy trip in the sense of like, it was like no fucking around.
Yeah, that's crazy. It wasn't like you're out in the open Atlantic, bro.
You had 6 hours awake, 6 hours of sleep, 6 hours awake, 6 hours of sleep for the whole time, because you're basically up and you're down, and there was
anybody on the boat have weed?
No, you couldn't. That was the whole thing too, and they were all like really straight on my ass. Yeah. Well, everyone smoked, but they just knew that you couldn't, because at that, like, I mean, I think it might even still be like this, but if you have a single joint on your boat, they take your boat.
Yeah, I believe that's still the same way.
You don't want to be the guy, right? Who's like, ugh. And so I literally I told them, I said, I'm going to smoke weed until we leave. As we leave, I will smoke my last joint on the boat as we leave, and I will toss it away, and that'll be it. And I will not bring any more. I guarantee you guys. And they were on they didn't believe me the whole time, and I was just like, no, I swear to God. And so every time we get somewhere,
don't have weed, guys.
I try to find weed, and it was so hard. It was so hard in such a short time frame,
right?
And all the boat people were super paranoid, and it was just kind of that time period. So we didn't smoke anything until we got to Gibraltar, and then in Gibraltar it was obviously super easy to find hash.
Yeah, but Moroccan hash are right there.
And it was like, and when we got to Gibraltar, we went to some fucking place, and it was like the most debaucherous place ever. So yeah, any drug you wanted, you could have there. It was like, yep, there you go. That's the spot right there. It's in between Morocco and fucking Spain. So I mean, come on, it's like it's the spot. It's the spot, right? And
I've been to places like that in Myanmar. And they're like, you want tiger penis?
and then we went to. And then we go into Turkey after that. I got off the boat in Turkey, went and hitchhiked around there, got left there, hitchhiked back from Turkey to England to find the boat, because I was pissed, because we were like, what the fuck? They left us here, and there's no cell phone, so you can't like call anybody up. So you're like,
left us.
They were like, what? Huh? I was like, all right, I got $100 in my pocket. You got how much? And they're like, we scrapped our money together, and we just hitchhiked the entire way.
That's crazy.
And made it back to England. And then when I got to England, I was in Hull, which is the north of England, and there's this ferry that goes over to Rotterdam from there. And I was all like, whoa, is that say Rotterdam? I'm like, dude. And he's like, oh yeah, it's over there. It's a couple hours, And I was just like, I'll be back. You know what I mean? And I just like
Famous last words.
I literally just like got a ticket and went straight to Rotterdam.
That's awesome.
Then from there to Amsterdam. And then I called my mom, and my mom basically gave me an address for one friend of ours over there. And she was a grower from NorCal who had moved out there. And
this is late 80s at this point?
Yeah, this is 89. Yeah, 89.
That's crazy.
And so she had been out there for about 11 years at that time. So she'd already been out there since the early 80s, like late 70s, early 80s. She moved out to Amsterdam and she was a grower. And then she was like, oh, well, I'm moving in with my girlfriend. If you want to take over my apartment. And I was like,
you're like, this is working out.
I was like, how much? And she's like, it's 190 guilders a month. And I'm like, that's like $90. I'm like, so I can have this whole apartment for $90 a month. I was like, oh, absolutely, 100%. Right? You know, so that was my.
I'll take it.
I was like, I'm here. So then I basically flew back to the States, sold my car. I had the old 98 at the time. Had my snowboard, which was a flight snowboard from Newport, Rhode Island, which was like the first.
Yeah, snowboards didn't even really exist yet.
Right. It was the first.
That's crazy.
It had it was a concave board with aluminum bindings on the sides. And it had it was the first one with like you could actually strap in. And it had a point, right?
Of course it had a point.
It had fins.
Oh, the fins, the little split fins.
Had 3 fins in the back. And the bitch was like, it was fast as fuck, but it was dangerous as fuck too. I was like, and it was
didn't
on
really
the
turn for anything.
Did it have edges?
It had edges. It had edges. Yeah, it had edges. It was the first one. Like so, in Burton,
I had a performer in like the late 80s, but it was one of the wood ones and it didn't have edges on it.
Yeah, this had edges. This had everything that you could imagine for the time period. And these guys who were out of Rhode Island, this is a skateboard company called Flight. They were like the cutting edge of everything at the time. Like they were really on it. And the funny thing is I remember going to the Burton shop at the time, like and it had like fucking string on it still. I was like, dude,
this is had the
like,
string through the
nose. Had the
That's
string, and it was like wah, wah, wah.
It was made out of wood.
And then all of a sudden I had this other one, and it was like it was the same colors as the hoodie you gave me, like this blue and black, and it was all super fucking stealthy. Anyway, so I sold that, sold my car, sold all my shit, got straight out to Amsterdam to be there for Queen's Day, because Queen's Day was what everybody kept telling me was the day. You got to be here.
You got to be here for Queen's Day.
Were you here for Queen's Day? No, you got to be here for Queen's Day. So I was like, all right, I'm
making it back.
And so I remember flying out there. I got there like a week before Queen's Day.
When is Queen's Day?
Yeah,
April 30th. It's April 30th.
Okay. No.
And so I arrived. I think I arrived around the 4th. Now it's the 30th.
We're flying back with Jair.
I better say I got a guy. We can figure this out.
They changed it to King. Oh no, it's the 29th now. They changed it to King's Day.
Okay.
So it's one day earlier. But anyway, it used
normally things don't go in that direction.
It used to be the coolest holiday ever. Now it's a bunch of bullshit. But back in the day, the only rules were there were no rules, right? And that was the best part about it. It was like no taxes. That's all they cared about, because the Dutch are like tax fixated. I'm sure you guys have understood this by dealing with them enough. They are very, 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 very much about taxes. So on that one day a year, you're allowed to sell anything you want, like a garage sale type vibe out in front of your place. You could perform music, you can do whatever, you can take money in, but you don't have to claim any of that because it's on that one day, right? So people went nuts.
That's kind of cool.
So people set it all up for that one day. They get all their shit together.
Buying the Louis Vuitton.
And so what happened was, so I got there, and of course I'm like, fuck, weed. That's the way to go, right? Weed is what you want to sell. So I ended up buying a bunch of weed. And I rolled tulip. I rolled tulip joints because I was like, okay, you're in Holland.
Let's go that. Yeah, I was like, I'm seeing the correlation here.
I was like, wait a minute.
I didn't even know those existed.
I was like, you guys don't know what a tulip joint is, right? And I'm showing people how to roll a tulip joint at a coffee shop, and they're like, oh, I've never seen that before. And I'm like, oh my god, this is going to kill.
The land of tulips.
I was like, I'm
killing it with this. This is amazing.
This is going to make so much money, right? So my dreams are like, I'm going to sit around and roll these tulip joints. So I get my friends together. We decided to take acid, of course, which is always a good idea.
You're doing the Magar before anybody even thought about it.
So I'm rolling these tulip joints. My friend's tripping balls, and he's like rolling in the weed, and I'm just like, dude, this is like you're killing me right now. You know what I mean? But I still managed to roll, I think, like 15 of these things, right? And I'm going to sell them all for like 10 guilders each or something stupid, some dumb price, which was way underpriced. Like I basically came in under
like losing money.
Oh, I'm losing money out the gate, and I'm rolling it pure because I'm not going to mix it with tobacco. I'm not
doing spliffs. These are real ones.
I'm going to do them with. So then,
cool idea though.
So I go out. I sell out in 5 minutes. Right? I'm like, holy shit! And then this guy walks up to me and goes, "Yes, they're taking your tulips and they're making mini joints from them and selling them." So basically, I got completely wholesaled out,
getting rebranded,
and they just ripped my shit up. Like I worked all night on these things, right, so that people could smoke them, and nobody smoked any of them. They just ripped them in half, poured out all the weed onto the top of a trash can, and started rolling joints to sell.
Adam thought he was B2C, but he was B2B.
I was totally B2B. Yeah,
that is hilarious.
So that was my first learning experience of like, oh yeah, okay.
I got hustled there.
I got a little. I thought I was doing something. I didn't really get much done there. Then the next year,
ripping them.
and I put so much energy and effort into them. Like I had went out and got all colored things to make the tubes out of, and I was like, all that, all for nothing. I could have just sold. I literally could have just walked out there with bags of weed, and it would have done better because I would have been like, that saved me 15 hours of work plus.
Yeah,
Oh, so we're in Amsterdam
and
now.
the tulips.
You're a young kid. I mean, obviously, I think that's probably some of the questions you get asked more than anything else. Is like, man, what was it like then? What were some of the crazy Amsterdam stories? Who were the people that you ran across?
No internet
at that time.
That's
all
the best
that.
part.
Best part, folks.
I could take a chance just to try. The first time I remember hearing about you, I was senior year of high school. I popped open a High Times, and there was an article about the leaf blower.
Oh, right. Nice one.
The leaf blower.
Yeah. Well, Amsterdam was, the thing about it is
crazy.
This is pre the bastardization of the genetics over there.
Pretty much. I mean, it was already kind of pretty solidly the same things over and over again. There wasn't a lot of people bringing stuff there. There was so when I first got there, I remember, so the first weed that I got was from the Grasshopper, and it was supposed to be Northern Lights. Let's hope it was. But I remember being pretty impressed. I was just impressed with the whole idea of it all because
just the ability to go to a store, purchase cannabis.
Grasshopper had they had a really cool thing where they had you walk in and you go downstairs, and they had a little kind of little guy behind the glass there, and then they had a little button. You push the button, it lights up, and then you see all the weed. And I was like, oh, that is cool. That to me was this is it. That's all I needed to see.
That would have got me too.
It was like Blade Runner.
Shangri-La.
Yeah, it was kind of like Blade Runner vibe or something where it was kind of futuristic, but kind of retro at the same time. And it was just simple. Anyway, that got me right out of the gate. I remember thinking oh my God, this place is amazing. And it ended up at Homegrown Fantasy. That was my spot. That turned into because they were the only ones that were growing their own weed.
Okay.
And so I kind of
single source. He's I want it all in-house.
I got gravitated towards that place, and many other people did too. And that's kind of where Dutch Passion Seed Company came from. Mm-hmm. So Hank Van Dalen was the owner of that place, and I was there for.
Was he the first breeder you really met?
Yeah, well, he at the time he was it was another guy named Yop who was actually doing most of the growing for them, and Yop, they basically, it was funny too. They had good weed. The best thing they had was an Afghan skunk on the menu, and that's what I ended up. It was my first plant that I grew out there because I got some seeds in it or whatever. But they were really into their purple weed at the time, and as we all know, purple weed doesn't necessarily doesn't give you the right effect. It's it's great the first time you see it, you get all excited.
Oh man,
you roll it up, and you're getting all oh my God, and then you smoke it, and you're like, I don't know, it didn't really do anything. So it was So he wasn't really breeding for sale any seeds at the time. But what was funny was that I would go there, and I would, I realized that there wasn't a lot to do as an American because there wasn't nothing to read and so I was kind of I was like, okay, I'll take an old Jack. I had Jack's book. That was the one thing that I took with me on the boat trip over. The whole time I was on the boat, all I ever did was read Jack's book and fucking read The Emperor and drive my fucking crew crazy because I'd be like, dude, you know how much weed we could. And I was like calculating how much weed I could grow in the thing, and I was like, on
like,
that,
bro,
just shut up,
fucking wacko.
Stop talking about weed all the time.
Like, chill with the weed already, bro.
Exactly.
I'm gonna be talking about weed my entire life, all right, bro.
So I took Jack's book and I went to a photocopy place and I remember I photocopied them in color, and I thought I was being really like super high tech because instead of doing them in black, I did them in red and green and like different colors. And so then I took like the articles that I thought were the most interesting, and I took a photo album and I put them into the photo album, and like so basically it's like a condensed version of Jack's book, so that if somebody was stoned hanging out there, they could read it, right? And so the guy who owned it, Hank, was like, "You really like this hemp stuff?" You know, I was like, "Yeah, fucking, it's the shit." You know what I mean? I already know. He's like, "Well, my friend owns the Hash Museum. Maybe I can get you a job over there." So he got me the job over at the Hash Museum. Cool. So he brought me over to meet Alan Drunkers, who was Ben's son, and I meet them and I go hang out over there. And it was funny because it was like, I go over there and they hired me to work at the Hash Museum. And the Hash Museum is basically like, it's 6 guilders to come in. You hit the button per one person, ding, ding, bing, give them a ticket. They walk through. You know, it's not a hard job, right? It gets pretty
straightforward.
Pretty straightforward. But they had like some plants growing in there, and they were terrible. And I remember like the first time I went in there, I was like, this is such a ripoff. Like you paid $6 to walk in a room and look at some crap. You know what I mean? Like this felt like a ripoff. So when I started working there, I was like, how can I help? I want to make this better.
Can I like take care of the plants?
I was like, can I clean this all out and do it? Yeah, do whatever you want. So we cleaned it all out. Sure. We started growing plants. Like they had like a terrarium thing in the middle of the room. It was really bad.
Of course they did.
And so I'm trying to do that, and I'm like in my own way trying to make the place a little bit better. And and then I'd go over and hang out with them on the seed side because they have Scentsy Seeds right next to the Hash Museum, right? And so when I go over to Scentsy, Alan, who is a great guy, but he's very nervous. He's kind of like, I'm not going to be like he has whatever, but he's kind of like Asperger's kind of vibe where you're just like
style.
very, very, very uncomfortable in his own skin sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the problem is that he's from Rotterdam, right? And in Amsterdam and Rotterdam have a lot of fucking animosity towards each other. So just if they hear your accents from Rotterdam, they're going to get on your, yeah, Rotterdam, eh? Yeah. So he was.
I swear to God, I'm from this side of the river, please.
So he was always nervous at his own shop because he's in the red light with a bunch of Dutch Amsterdammers, you know, real Amsterdammers,
right?
Like, and they don't want nothing to do with fucking Rotterdam people, you know. So it was always this weird thing. So I go over there, and he was always uncomfortable. But the best customers that were coming in were golden because they were all these Americans who would fly over to Amsterdam to go to Scentsy Seeds to spend real money. Because this is in 1989, right? 1989, 1990. So it's like the time period, right?
Yeah, and the Reagan era, there's money.
Yeah. And so I remember like just hanging out, and some customer came in, and he was an American guy. And I remember he was asking about Williams Wonder, and they don't sell it, right? So they basically instantly he's like, he had one line, which was grow it and you'll know it. That's all he would say. Like that was his only sales pitch. Grow it and you'll know it. And I'm like, that is not going to work. Like that makes me think.
Gotta refine that a little.
That sounds like grow it and you'll find out it sucks to me is what I hear. Right? Like
I know what you're saying, but this is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. You don't hear like, it's going to be great. He's like, yes, grow it and you'll know it. Grow it and you'll know it. Because he was very uncomfortable speaking English too. So anyway, I was like, oh, well, that's SSSC. That's not from us. That's from this company. So I'm telling them what I know. And I don't really know a lot of the time. I'm just like, I got a couple catalogs and I heard about it. I've never experienced. And so after this guy leaves, guy spends like a couple grand, right? And then Alan's like, holy shit. Like that guy, he was ready to leave. The guy walked in, he's like, okay, I'm out of here. And then I was like, oh, Williams Wonder. Oh yeah, it's from SSSC. I go, you know that comes from the Midwest in America, right? And the guy goes, oh, really? I'm from Nebraska. And it was like, oh, bum. We had this conversation. And from little knowledge I knew of the plant, I pretty much learned something from him and learned something because he was like, oh yeah, because my friends are growing it. And if you flower it before you put it outside, it's amazing. But if you let it go on its own natural cycle, it will never doesn't ever finish properly. It always kind of, so what you have to do is you have to almost like trick it outdoors, get it going, and then it just keeps going and going and going and going. Anyway, so I learned something from him, and then I taught something to him by whatever I knew. And so Alan was like,
this guy might be worth a shit.
You might want to hit. So that I ended up starting working on that side.
Really?
And Alan would start to take time off because he's like, I don't even want to come to Amsterdam if I don't have to. You can run it, right? You're good. And I'd be like, all right, I'm good. And so there was time periods where I was like running the whole store. I don't speak any Dutch. I'm like him with my Dutch, like he was with his English, where I'm just like, I'm like, can it go help? And he's like, oh, you speak really bad Dutch. And I'm like, I know. I know. Yes, that's all I know. Can I help you? Like over and over. And then everything from that point. But then it was actually the same time period. So 91 is when Neville came back from Australia, when they bought out his stuff. So I was there for the whole transition period, which was pretty interesting because like I didn't realize where I was at the time. Like if I could go back in time, I would have been much more
with it.
Like give me, I'll take anything you guys. Right. They were like literally like offering me all sorts of stuff, and I was just like, whatever. Like, they were like, you want do you want these?
Just more seeds. I don't need them.
And I wasn't really thinking like I was just not on the same tip at the time. I was just kind of like thinking like, oh, this will always be around or whatever.
Yeah. I think that's what a lot of us thought.
And so there was, old seeds from Sensi that there was on there. So their original catalog used to be like Shiva Shante 1.
I remember the Shiva's the first weed I ever saw in like 94. I remember seeing it. And I was like I remember a guy in Missoula was growing it, and he came out and it was a baseball bat of weed. And that's the first I ever I had seen stuff before from like Humboldt County and stuff, but that Shiva, I remember it stood out. It was just so gorgeous.
So Ben's kids were named Ravi, Shiva, Shanti, right? Like, and so their strains were Purple Ravi, the Shiva Shante 1, the Shiva Shante 2. They had Garlic Bud at the time, which was actually pretty good, like that little leafy, but it definitely had that like pre-GMO kind of vibe thing to it, where you're like, okay, that's something in there. Lingering. And then they took over Neville, and they had a thing called, they had a 4-way, and they had 4 and more. They had one called 4 and more, which was a 4-way sativa. They had 4-way, which was a 4-way indica, right? So the 4 and more, I got the last pack off of them because they were like, that was the one thing I was like, I guess I'll take these, like, And so then I guess, and I grew those at my house, at that same first house that I had, which was $190 or 190 guilders a month or whatever. So I had like a whole attic which I could grow in, and I was just like this is great. Right? So I went home, set up this little thing, grew those seeds out, and I remember like my mom came and she looked at them and she goes like, that doesn't even look like weed. Like it was like really, really weird. Like everything was mutated. Everything had a mutant. Everything had like leaves growing out the middle, like the class, they had that going on. And the color was really off. The color was like a kind of almost like a tan color almost, they were like weird. They didn't have like a green. They weren't green and they weren't blue or purple. They were like tan colored. They were weird. And so my mom was like, those look weird. And I was like, I know, they're strange. And they didn't grow big. They grew really small. Even though they were 4-way sativas, they were like almost like a pineapple. Like where you were like the ultimate plant almost. Like you're like, dude. And so I remember like I grew them out. And I cut them all down and I dried them out. And Holland is really hard to dry weed too. It's like one of those places where it's an opposite of here. Like it's like it's 2 weeks later and shit's still spongy, and you're like, what the fuck?
Is this ever gonna smoke?
You got to put a lot of air movement around them, and then that of course dries them out too much from the outside. So then you end up having to like it's very hard. It's like completely opposite problem. So I was like, I used like boxes, and I poked holes in the boxes, and I stuck all the stems through the boxes, and I put them in, and I turned them in there, and stacked them all in the corner, and kind of opened them up every day. And so finally, when I like can finally smoke it,
I've been there.
I'm like smoking I smoked a joint, and I remember I was sitting there with a friend of mine, and I swear to God, my head, like I went like, what, huh? Like holy fuck! Like it tasted like pure haze. It grew like a pineapple. Right.
Wild.
And it was like, and I remember like looking over at the cut down plant, and I was like, I probably should have not cut that down. Like I probably should have kept that somehow, because that is literally the last pack that ever existed of that particular one.
Yeah,
okay? And I was like, wow, I really fucking like, it was because you always have the one that got away story or whatever. That is to me the one that got away, because now that I know what it was, like I can remember the texture of it being like, it's like that texture I love, which is like, it will not dry. Because it was like that, I was saying how it wasn't going to dry. And like you put it in your teeth and it's got this kind of like,
coat your teeth.
Like it's like thick, like fruit or something. It's got like a I don't know, whatever it was, that thing was awesome. And like
4 and more.
It did it all.
The lore of 4 and more.
It did it all. Like I was like, fuck. And 4-way, everybody's heard of 4-way. That's been around for a long time. And there's a lot of different variables. Because it's a 4-way hybrid, you're never going to have the same, like it's going to be this, it's going to be that, it's going to be in this corner, that corner. But yeah, so then I was there. So I went from there. I was at Sensi till 93 is when Chris Conrad, who wrote he helped Jack write The Emperor, right? So if you look at it, says edited by Chris Conrad. And Chris Conrad, for all intended purposes, he actually wrote the fucking book, right? Because Jack loved Jack, but he's definitely the vocal part. He's the mouthpiece. He's the guy out there, rabble rouser. You know what I mean? That's been his whole thing. Whereas Chris is like the organized guy who puts it all together. So Chris came to work for Sensi. He redid the hash museum. They turned it into the hemp museum. So this was like the moment in time where also Hempflax started, which was Hempflax is Sensi's hemp thing that they literally spent millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars trying to get hemp going.
Cannabis cups are happening at this time in Holland.
Not yet. No, not yet. This is exactly the moment when. So they were happening, but not in my world yet. Yeah. So what had happened was this other guy, Dion Markgraf, who was working also. He was working at Sensi after, like, I'd already quit. Started growing for a bunch of gangsters who, classic too, like, Yair would have fit perfect in with these guys because they were like they had like pit bulls, Mercedes, and tracksuits, right? I mean, it was like 90s.
Spot on.
You know the
spot on.
You already know. You know the look.
Jair was one of those guys.
Oh no, he would have with a thin gold.
Oh, thin gold. Yeah, no, not one of these. Yeah, not one of these Cuban links. I mean, we're talking like
they would only wear the thin ones. Those guys.
Yeah. Way classier.
And a ring that was way too tight.
Make their fingers look all fat.
Exactly. So I ended up when I was working at Sensi, these guys would come in all the time and they'd be like, "Yes, you know a lot about weed, huh?"
I know things.
I know stuff. And I was literally every day I was learning. So I was like by no means an expert on anything because I had gone straight.
But at this point, you're in the epicenter of weed culture for the world.
Exactly. And so I'm just reading everything I can read and doing, and I'm selling lights and I'm selling food. Like I had to come in the morning and make the food for Sensi. So it's funny too, because Sensi had their own formula, AB formula, and they had they had a fish thing. They had a kelp. They had a fish product, a kelp product.
I remember.
They had an AB, and then they had a bloom booster thing, right?
Yep. And I remember that. Now that you're saying, it's funny to hear you say it.
And so my job was, I'd come in the morning, and I'd have to like get out one of their, because everything came dry except for, so you had to I had to mix up a 20 liter of A, a 20 liter of B. Then I had to pour them into the things. And
he said liters.
Yeah. and I had to put stickers on them in the morning and then set them up and then fill them all up. So I had the green one, the red one.
Yeah.
It was basically like classic. It was like they had their own it was like they didn't have General Hydro's formula yet, but they were kind of like, they had their own thing going on.
Right. Kind of in that vein though.
And yeah, exactly. And you had to really make, like, one of the bags had like everything in it. And then the other one was just straight calcium stuff. So like, kind of like the one that had everything in it was a pain in the ass because it would like be cold and you're trying to dissolve it.
It would like, go in the solution.
It was a nightmare. It would all fall out. You know what I mean? And so anyway, I was doing that every morning, coming in, mixing stuff, selling lights. So I was like, again, like
you're like us.
I'm as close as I could do at the time. Right. And so these guys ended up hiring me, and they got me a car. They got me like an Opel Kadett station wagon, and
solid.
It's a great car.
Hired me, and we ended up with this grow that was under the train tracks in Rotterdam, and it was like these public spaces that they could rent from the government because they were like the underneath the train tracks. So you had the upper room, which is like curved, and then the lower room, which is squared out, but it was still dirt floors and funky, and it was bad. It was like one of those things where, and I ended up working.
As bad as it sounds.
But so people understand, as I remember at the time, like all the growers are growing just these little. Anybody who's supplying the coffee shops is growing in these tiny little spots. They're
exactly.
all
and so these guys they had 3 coffee shops between them, and they basically were like hiring me to come in to help them grow, and they were going to put up a couple hundred lights and go big, right? They were like, and they're going to,
that is going big,
and they're Dutch and they're super duper cheap, right? So like the cheapest guys ever, right? And they know, and everything they want to do,
they don't call it going Dutch or nothing.
And everything they want to do, they know somebody, right? So they're like, yes, I know my guy. He's going to get me. So they come with this whole truckload of fucking garbage, right? And I'm just like, what is this? Like,
this is crap.
There's these lights from this greenhouse and from that greenhouse, and there's these old ones and pot lamps and fucking all different companies. Like, you're like, and so we're like, I'm like hodgepodging all this stuff together. And the funny thing was, on the very first day, they pull up and I'm drawing out plans and stuff for them. And I go, all right, well, first thing I need is hot water. And they're, okay, yes, we got you. Yes. They come back and they bring the truck and they're unloading everything, rock wool, this, that. I'm like, hot fucking water, dude. I need hot water.
Where's it at?
I got to clean this place. This is like it's got dirt floors. Come on, dude. This is like a nightmare, And then he goes, oh, yes. And he reaches down. He's in this truck, and he hands out to me, the trucker things for heating up your fucking coffee. He gives me one of those. And I'm like,
like an electric kettle sort of thing.
Just a little one you put into a single mug, not even like a big one. I'm like,
not even a kettle, a mug.
I'm like, you want me to clean thousands of square fucking feet of space? I mean, are you kidding me right now? And then it was just like, we're not on the same page. So I already knew like that this wasn't going to last. I did one crop with those guys. They harvested without telling me on week 6. Maybe going into week 7,
lovely.
End of week 6, going into week 7
for me.
And I came in one day and was like, hey, I think we've been robbed, dude. And they were like, oh no, we came and we took it. Don't worry. It's okay. I'm like, you came and took it? I go, we haven't even flushed it yet. What are you talking about? Like, we're still
growing, or we're supposed to be.
And they were like, yes, we needed the weed. It's okay. And I'm like, So then I ended up quitting from them.
We needed the weed.
Quitting with them. And Chris Conrad was asked at the time by High Times to help them put together the cup, because they were on their 6th cup at the time, right? So they've already done 5 cups. The guy who became my partner, Dion, went to the 5th cup. And he told me it was a joke. He goes, dude, it's just like 5 guys sitting around getting high, writing an article.
Was Pinsky there yet?
No. He came. He did come the year after we did ours, the 2nd year after us. But then he came on the 7th. But the 6th cup, which was the cup that we were helped organize. So basically they came to Chris Conrad, said, hey, Chris, you're living over there now. Can you do this? And Chris is like, I don't know nothing about that. Why don't you talk to Adam and the boys, right? Because we were like the on the scene guys, right? So they were like, okay, cool. So loosely, all of a sudden we get offered, hey, you guys want to do the Cannabis Cup, And I'm like, the Cannabis Cup? Like my fucking, I'm going off. It's like, what? This is going to be the greatest thing ever. And then I realized, my friend Dion goes, dude, it was so bad last year. We can do better. Don't worry. We can do better.
Easily.
So we figured out we were going to do it in, I believe it was June, they asked us. July 1st, we got a spot. So we got the CIA, which is our very first spot in Amsterdam, which was an warehouse space above a garage. And the guys who owned the garage were like, we called them Magnum and Mario, because it was like one guy looked like Mario and one guy looked like Magnum, like totally, right? Like exactly. And they were the shadiest guys in the world. Like they were like the smiley Dutch guys who had all these pictures of yachts on the wall. Like these were like, oh, you go into their office and they have like all these yachts, and you're like, wow, these are nice. And, oh yeah, and they
you're like, I know about boats.
They rent. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So we got along because of the whole boat thing, and they were renting caravans. So I was like, oh, renting caravans, that's interesting. And welding in the middle of the night. All night, every night. We'd be like, I could hear them. Smoke coming up through my floors and shit. And so I was like, it took me years to figure out how shady they were. Like they were sending just loads of hash back and forth to Morocco. It was just guys coming and going all day, every day. So we open up Cannabis in Amsterdam right above their fucking smuggling thing, which is I'm sure they love that. Right?
Seems like a good location.
I put a sign outside with a picture of the CIA logo so it was an eagle, but we had a joint hanging out of his mouth. And that was how we did our logo, right? So I have that outside,
dude,
and we set up shop there, and basically we knew we had the Cannabis Cup to do, so we started in July 1st. We had our new spot. It was huge, like for Amsterdam standards, it was huge. It was probably about 3,500 square feet or something like that, which is quite big in Amsterdam. Most places in Amsterdam are 100 square feet. You know what I mean? It's like tiny
closets.
So we had this big space and no money, and we were just like, we're going to make this happen though. We're going to figure this out. So we start going around, hustling, going to shops. Every place we go to, they give us grief. They're like, High Times, hell no. Those people, because they have never done a good job of taking care of people when they go to places, or they always kind of leave a bill or do something.
To this day, it seems
not
to be
the best
the
at cleaning up.
No, so they had already kind of created. They had already fucked up over the last 5 years by trying to do this thing and never really doing it properly. So in the end, we ended up with, I think we had 16 shops sign up. We put together a little book. We made, I got DJs, bands. I did everything I thought you should do for a cup, right? We put together, we separated the coffee shops and the seed companies, because we're like, well, what seed companies can't legally give weed to people. So why don't we have the celebrities?
We got to break this up.
Yeah, we'll have the celebrities judge that, and then we'll have the people go like a pub crawl, but with coffee shop crawl, and they'll go around. So then we did all that, made it quite successful. The first one, I think they brought over 50 people from America, right? So 50 people paid $200 each for a ticket to come over to there, right? So in our minds, there was a $10,000 budget, right? That's how we thought. Because hey, these people paid $200 each. There's 50 of them. That's $10,000. Cool. So we'll spend about up to $10,000, and then they'll pay us back, because that's how High Times is. Because they're totally up. They're the kind of company that will definitely pay their bills, right? So we go. We rent a club. We do this. We get printing done. We make books. All the judges get a book. They all have a map. They're going around. Everything's great until the final day. We're leaving town. Like everyone's leaving. And it's kind of like, okay, so we're going to get the money back for the thing. Well, we never told you to do any of that. You know what I mean? It's like, so you never told us to do any of that, but you wanted us to do the cup. So we did the cup, and this is what it costs.
This is what it takes to do a cup.
I mean, this is a cup.
Oh, but we never asked you to do any of that. You could, well, that was all on you.
You
was
just
oh, wait a minute. Oh shit. And so the funny part was my partner, Doug, was taking Steve Hager and the whole crew, all the Dragon, whatever crew, to the airport. And they still hadn't given us any money. So on the way there, Doug plays mega power move, like super power move, where he even forgot this whole detail. And later when I told him, like years later,
he's like, really? I did that?
He's like, oh yeah, I remember that.
I did do that, didn't I?
He stopped his van in the middle of the fucking highway, literally in the middle of the highway, like middle row of middle lane.
Right.
Stopped and said, you're going to pull that money out of your pocket, or I'm not moving. And cars are going like around him like 100 miles an hour, and he's sitting in the middle lane, and they're like, you're crazy, man, you're crazy. And he pulls his money out, fucking paid him on the spot. So I was like, Doug, you did it, you got the money, because he came back like, got the money.
Got the money. Like, I don't even care how you got it, you got it.